Once upon a time, a weaver from the court of heaven disobeyed the law of the Jade Emperor by falling in love with a mortal cowherd and abandoning her sky loom half woven with colorful clouds to be with her human lover. Yet she could not help missing the courts of heaven, and would return secretly to her work, her cloud leavings. And so it happened that one day the Jade Emperor discovered her treachery. Furious, he drew a river of stars between heaven and earth to keep the lovers apart, trapping the celestial weaver on one bank of the Milky Way and the lowly cowherd on the other. But seeing their unending tears, all the birds in the world took pity on the broken-hearted lovers, and bridged the banks of the starry river so they could meet, if only for that moment on borrowed wings. Fakir stirred drowsily, his sleep-heavy eyes opening to the white sheets on Duck's bed. He stood, stretching his back and shoulders gratefully, tired, but still feeling more refreshed, more clear-headed than before. Even Duck can be right sometimes, he mused, turning back to look down at the sleeping girl, and finding only an empty bed and rumpled sheets. For one unreal moment, he wished he were dreaming, caught only in a terrible nightmare where he had awoken to find his worst fears realized. He had merely closed his eyes, and Duck had vanished, as he had been nothing more than light all along, forever beyond his reach. But this was no passing nightmare, he knew, but a terrible and an inescapable reality. He tried to calm his son in panic by reassuring himself that perhaps a nurse had come to help her to the bathroom. Thought of any number of mundane scenarios, but as the minutes passed and she did not return, he felt panic bloom in his chest. It was the memory of her wondering if Princess Tutu could help the cursed townsfolk that made his blood run cold. Surely she wouldn't try something so dangerous when she was so far from recovering. The doctor had not minced words, and she did not take her recovery seriously. Duck was in very real danger of risking and perhaps losing her life. In the end, it did not matter how or why she had vanished, whether it was in a flash of light or to help the townsfolk. She was gone, and there was only one thing that could mean. He roused himself enough for the paralyzing fear to move, knocking over his chair in careless haste, thinking desperately to search for her without knowing where he could possibly begin. In that moment, Mythos entered, slowly wakening Duck in his arms. Mythos! Surprise and anger suffused his voice at the other boy's carelessness, and for a strange, disoriented moment, he felt as if he was transported back in time, scolding a heartless Mythos for risking his life for foolish trifles, or threatening Princess Tutu when she could not leave well enough alone, and insisted on hazarding Mythos's life in the story once more. It was a curiously similar fury, a familiar fear of losing someone else he held so dear, that welled up within him now. She's hardly recovered. How could you think to—
Wait, Fakir,
Duck said in a tired voice.
I was the one that asked him.
His fear could not be turned aside so slightly, and he stepped back. That doesn't mean he should have. If you don't have the sense to realize it doesn't mean he— But turning back to Mythos and seeing the torn look in the prince's eyes, Fakir could not find it in himself to continue. No, this was not the same Mythos Fakir had cared for and struggled to protect throughout his childhood. This was not the same hapless, heartless prince Fakir had tried to control in order to save himself, but a prince forced to make decisions that were lined with sorrow no matter what choice he made. Forgive me, Duck, Fakir. It was ill done of me. Mythos eased Duck down to the bed, and although he faced them both, his gaze and his thoughts seemed to be directed inward. When I was heartless, at least I endangered only myself in my thoughtlessness, but now, waiting for the townsfolk, I did not think to worry for Duck as well. It was a heavy burden having a heart. Yes, Fakir said, having once given up his own because it became unbearable. Fakir's anger drained, leaving an emptiness, a hollow feeling in his wake, and he wondered why he had opened his heart again, when he already knew that loving was so taxing, so painful, always so fraught with the threat of loss.
There's nothing for you to apologize for, Mythos,
Duck insisted.
I asked you to help me to the link.
Duck's casual dismissal of the dangers he had put herself made Fakir's cooling temper flare once more. Sitting down beside her on the edge of the bed, he demanded, his voice harsh with worry, but the hands on her shoulders gentle, hesitant. Are you an idiot? Don't you understand? You can't go prancing around like that unless you want to endanger. And that, of course, set Duck off.
You're the one who doesn't understand. You don't understand anything at all.
Duck repeated with righteous fury, forgetting Mythos, forgetting for her weariness and the anger that surged through her at Fakir's sudden determination to continue as he started, alone.
You got no right to listen to me about my health and safety when you never care or worry about yourself.
She answered heatedly, tears in her eyes for remembered worry, even as she yelled out. Somehow, after the first few words had come tumbling out, she could not stop the rest.
Who's the one who took out his heart and practically killed himself? You're probably planning on doing something just as dumb all by yourself without telling me.
Oh, but it's all right for you to run out by yourself and do just that. But Duck was too angry to let him get a word in edgewise.
I wasn't alone. I went with Mythos, and I told you I was worried about Pink and the others, and I wanted to see if I could at least help her. And you wouldn't listen. And I'm worried about you too. You keep thinking you had to do this all by yourself. Mythos and Rue are looking for statues, but you think it's up to you to find the answer all alone.
It's a mess I created and one I'll fix, so stay out of it. Fakir's expression shuddered and he turned away. Of course, Duck was not one to take a hint, and ignored his clear dismissal of the topic. Fakir realized that this was nothing at all like dealing with a reluctant, heartless Mythos.
Don't you understand it doesn't work that way? Why are you so big at it?
Duck exclaimed, exasperated and clear in every line of reply. At this, Fakir snapped back. You're a fine one to talk about working together, running off on your own when you're in no condition for it.
Because you wouldn't listen. I can't just sit by while this is happening. Why can't we work together to fix this like we did the last time?
They had been arguing so intensely, their faces merely inches apart, so you could see the moment all fight went out of him, and he said with weariness that saddened her, because this time, it's all my fault. She practically pulled her hair in frustration at that.
Look here, it's not your fault there were ravens already in people's hearts. And it's not your fault they were turned to stone. Not your fault I only returned to a piece of your heart to you.
And suddenly, all the pieces fell into place for Duck.
It's not your fault I went back to being a duck and started losing myself.
He sighed, closing his eyes, wondered how he'd been to the heart of his fear. But then, he knew, despite his own claim just now, she was, and always would be, Princess Tutu. She leaned forward, closing those few inches between them. Duck could see him hurting. Without even thinking about what she was doing, she kissed him, tenderly pressing her lips against his in an impulsive gesture of love and comfort. So simple and heartfelt that even she forgot to be embarrassed.
I choose to do it,
She added softly.
You can't make my choices for me, and you can't hold yourself responsible for them.
When I woke and you were gone, I thought, just because you were Princess Tutu once doesn't mean it's your job to save us all. You'll only get yourself hurt, and I'll lose you. And the word again hung in the air between them, unspoken yet almost palpable. And because he could not bear exposing so much emotion, Fakir drew back from that too vulnerable admission, and instead, refusing to meet her eyes, said, I just want to keep you safe. It was true. Just as much as preying on his mind, yet nowhere nearly as raw as a confession. She kept his face gently in her hands, forcing him to look at her as she told him the truth he would not face otherwise.
That means you won't listen to me, won't let me live my life, that like today, we'll always be acting alone, even when we are together.
Promise me then. Fakir insisted, stubborn as ever, his arms encircling her, holding her close. Promise me you'll be more careful in the future. What you did today was incredibly dangerous and stupid. She smiled, nestling in the warmth of his embrace.
As long as you do the same, and promise to be less of a pig-headed jerk.
Neither noticed the eerie silence that had overtaken the building. Mythos slipped away when he realized after the first few insults the argument wasn't about him at all. He had felt such an intruder and yet invisible, all at once, as Duck and Fakir tore into each other. Riley, he wondered if he even noticed their absence. Such frivolous thoughts left him as he walked toward the town and caught sight of a statue here at a street corner, there before a storefront. Already there were several more there than nearly an hour ago. The story's curse was spreading. He had seen firsthand how much helping only one person had drained Duck. Weak as he still was, how could he personally turn back so many others? After returning to the lake, rousing Peak, and then helping the disoriented girl back into the dormitory, he stood at the front of the building. but did not catch sight of Rue at her still curtainless window. Picking a pebble, he tossed it at her window, the light gravel tapping against the glass. A shadow moves within, and then the casement opened, and Rue, gingerly sitting down ajar on the window ledge, leaned out. Despite the gravity of the situation they were in, something within him smiled to see his usually elegant Rue looking petulant at the thought of having to feed the fledgling ravens the disgusting meal once more. "Shall I serenade you, my lady? Or will you take pity on your poor swain and come on down?" He could see her smile as gently teasing flirtation even from this distance. And again he wondered how he had not noticed its absence for days, perhaps weeks, once he had been right beside him.
"I will gladly come down if you'll handle the rest of this,"
she answered, indicating the jar. Despite the light-hearted ease of her words, he could not help thinking that Rue was avoiding him, and then did not wish to look into his eyes for fear of what she would find there, or not. When she joined him a few minutes later, a flock of nestlings about her, she handed him the jar distastefully. As Mythos continued the task, careful of his fingers, Rue remarked,
"Really, they should do their own foraging by now. At this point, I think we're just spoiling them."
Mythos smiled, and yet could not help but feel the uneasiness that hovered between them still, and seemed to shadow every word spoken between them. They decided the day before that the only way to cover so much ground so quickly would be to split up, and at that time the decision had been easier to make, because neither wanted to face immediately the shadows that lay between them. "We never did have that promised conversation. Everything has been so chaotic," he remarked at last. She nodded her agreement, but then said,
"There's nothing left for me to say. You know how I feel."
A raven nipped his hand in his inattentiveness, but Nithos did not feel the pain. "You have been unhappy." Only now did she have the strength to confess what she had always known, but been too afraid to admit, even to herself, until coming back to Gold Crown. Duck, a tour, this place, all had brought back to her the Rue she had been here, the Rue that she had thus desperately tried to lose for the sake of his love.
"Part of me will still always be Karehi, so uncertain in myself, jealous of your regard, and always fearful of losing your love."
Reaching out for her scratched hand and cradling it in hers, she asked without meeting his eyes,
"Can you love me still?"
"When the raven's blood raged within me, you were nothing to me," Mythos said at last, and Rue felt her heart crumble. She had the answer she sought. So much for Duck's idealistic nonsense about love and its strength. She had been raised as the raven's daughter. She knew it was a frail, helpless thing, an unsavory truth. Love. She released his hand. But Mythos did not let her turn away from him, did not release the fingers to let go of his. At that time, when I lost myself almost entirely, if you were something I did not hate, then you were nothing. Then you spoke, Rue, and summoned out of me what you had loved, and I still not understand. Her head bowed still, her eyes shadowed. He knelt, still holding her hand, earnestness in expression as he looked up into her eyes, the very picture of a fairy tale prince before his princess. And his words were filled with more painful self-knowledge than any storybook princess had been. "When I told you that Raven's blood had probably remained within me, just as it remained within you, and it made me want to love you more than anything else. I thought that loving you was a flaw in me. The prince was supposed to love everyone. And so," he continued, "I tried to return to what I thought I should be, and buried that ravenous part in me that wants to follow its own desires. It was easier to do in the fairy tale kingdom, where the only imperfect thing seemed to be my heart." Ruth stared at that, hearing her own thoughts, her own tortured feelings coming from Mythos's lips. "Only after encountering these fierce, helpless things," Mythos said, raising one hand to gesture at the ravens that continued to call imperiously at being ignored, "did I begin to see that perhaps I was mistaken all along. In their beauty and wildness, they were so like you. I could not bring myself to hurt them. I have been battling the raven for so long, had been my sworn enemy for so long, that I had forgotten that there was any way to face the ravens but with a sword. And so I suppressed the desires of raven's blood, raised my blade against my most loyal knight, and brought you sorrow." You could see the apology in his eyes. Before it could make it to his lips, for the error had not been his alone. So he reached out her free hand and brushed back his hair, feathery hair, and spoke. We have. Both of us, it seems, have been so desperately trying to leave behind our shadows, to run from them even as they follow at our feet, lost sight of ourselves and of each other. And then, because of what she felt was too great to put into words, Rue answered lightly, hoping to ease a little the grimminess of his expression. I hope it is only beauty that you think I have in common with these ravens. We certainly have different tastes, I assure you. Oh, my princess, he answered with a wistful smile, taking the hand he held as he knelt before her still, bringing it to his lips. I have not spoken with you like this for so long. I did not want to see the shape of my reflection in your eyes. I did not realize until now that in doing so, I made my heart a dead thing. And yet, for all Mythos and Rue wished to talk longer, both knew it was not a luxury that the current situation would allow. Even before they left the academy grounds, they were struck by the startling silence. The statues that dotted the grassy lawns of the campus were finally sculpted artwork. Students, a still life. It was even more chilling when they realized they had reached the town square, which was crowded with dozens of statues. Ah! There's the Z letter! I knew it! We used all 26 letters of the alphabet. The most unnerving part was that the living did not seem to think anything was amiss. Walking through the maze of marble sculptures as if they had always been there, the curse was spreading, much farther than before, and they had not found a way to stop it. Even the very air seemed darker, heavy with the promise of misfortune. The rest of the hospital, only to find that all of the staff had turned to stone.